SBC simply isn't doing its job, and we need new commissioners promptly installed to make sure that this 2012 election is handled fairly and thoroughly.
Melanie Sloan, Executive Director of Crew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll take you live now to the House floor. Thanks for joining us today.
The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., February 7, 2012. I hereby appoint the Honorable Todd C. Young to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 17, 2012, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour and each member other than the majority and minority leaders in the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Dreyer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was very sad to get the news last Friday of the passing of our former colleague, Congressman Jim Lloyd. Jim Lloyd and I began as political adversaries in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and we ended up as great friends and allies on a wide range of issues. Jim was a dedicated patriot. He was a public servant and had a very distinguished military record as well. Politically, he began as the mayor of West Covina, California, and many have said that he indicated right then that he wanted to have an opportunity to serve in the United States House of Representatives. He also had served as a Navy fighter pilot, and Mr. Speaker, I had a conversation with his son Brian last night and his grandson Seth, and Jim was able to spend his last moments on this earth with his grandson, who was following in his footsteps. His grandson Seth is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis and is now training at Pensacola, Florida. Jim had driven across the country and was visiting Seth and had just been with him before he suffered a massive stroke and drove off the road, ending his life as a hero. His son Brian told me last night that there was a woman who was in the way of the car, and even though his foot had gone to the accelerator and he'd suffered this stroke, he was still a hero in that he was able to steer the car out away from hitting this woman before it went into a ravine. Last summer, his wife of 63 years, Jackie, his great ally, passed away, and Jim told me when we had a lengthy conversation following her passing that it was as if half of him was gone. And so, Mr. Speaker, I have to say that Jim lived a very full 89 years. And he was a very distinguished member of this institution, serving on the Armed Services Committee and as a member of the Science and Technology Committee, where he chaired a subcommittee. And he made a great mark on many very, very important questions that we faced. And I have to say that it was a privilege for me, again, having begun as an adversary of his, to have ended a very close and dear friend and a political ally. And I have to say also that there are many people here in this Capitol who knew him and worked with him, even though he left more than 3 decades ago. But I have to say to Mary Klappa, who now works for our colleague John Mica, who was the one who informed me of this sad news, and the many others who worked with Jim Lloyd, who was so dedicated to constituent service and provided an example and model for me, that our thoughts and prayers are with all of you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 2011 marked an unfortunate milestone in our country's financial picture when, for the first time in American history, student loan debt actually exceeded credit card debt, which, again, by itself is just a huge statement in terms of the challenges that families, middle-class families and working families are facing today in terms of trying to deal with the cost of higher education. The value of a higher education degree or post-high school degree, which is sometimes debated in the media, still, I believe, is indisputable, and the statistics certainly demonstrate that. At a time when our national unemployment rate is 8.3%, if you drill down deeper, you'll learn that those with only a high school degree, the unemployment rate is 16.5%. That's less than a high school degree. Those with a high school degree, it's 10.7%. Those with some college is 8.5%. And those with a bachelor's degree or higher is 4.5%. So the stakes could not be higher for young people all across our country that we must deal with the mounting cost of higher education and provide mechanisms for them and their families to actually finance it and pay for it. In 2007, the Democratic-controlled Congress passed the College Cost Reduction Act, which was a terrific measure that cut the interest rates for the Stafford Student Loan Program, the federally subsidized student loan program that provides some stability and affordability for middle-class families, from 6.8% down to 3.4%. In addition, we unfroze the Pell Grant program, which is the workhorse of paying for college education, all of it paid for by eliminating wasteful subsidies to banks. That measure has a sunset this July. The interest rate reduction of the College Cost Reduction Act will, in fact, expire on July 1st unless Congress acts. President Obama, in his State of the Union address a few nights ago, raised this issue before all of us in the House and Senate when he said, when kids do graduate, the most daunting challenge can be the cost of college. At a time when Americans owe more in tuition debt than credit card debt, this Congress needs to stop the interest rates on student loans from doubling in July. Mr. Speaker, shortly after his address, myself and Congressman Peters from Michigan introduced H.R. 3826, which is a measure which would extend the 3.4%, the lower interest rates on the Stafford Student Loan Program, and in just a few days we have accumulated 55 co-sponsors to this measure. Again, the math is there crystal clear. If we do not act, if we do not maintain those interest rates at 3.8%, if Congress does nothing, the U.S. Public Interest Research Group has calculated that for those students who take out the maximum $23,000 in subsidized student loans, their interest payments will increase by $5,200 over a 10-year repayment period and $11,300 over a 20-year repayment period. Now, if you told middle-class families, if Congress doesn't act on a measure like this, your out-of-pocket costs are going to go up $5,200 for taxes, there would be a huge hue and cry about the fact that Congress must not let that happen. Well, that is exactly the same situation that we face today with the Stafford Student Loan Program. And again, we know from the passage of the College Cost Reduction Act that this is something that this body is capable of doing. This past weekend, I was with a family whose son is now in his junior year as an undergraduate, has almost perfect 4.0 grade average, very motivated to go into healthcare field, and he's already accumulated $100,000 in student loan debt. We as a nation must address this problem. The National College Board, which tracks graduation rates internationally, reminds us that back in the 1980s, the U.S. was #1 in the world in terms of graduation rates. We have fallen to number 12, according to the National College Board, and the biggest reason that students are not finishing college is because of affordability and cost. Again, the President laid out the challenge to the Congress at the State of the Union address. We must not allow Stafford student loan interest rates to double on July 1st. We should pass H.R. 3826. We should get that to the President so that colleges and universities can help families plan their tuition payments for the upcoming year and not allow this country to go backwards in terms of making sure that we have the finest workforce in the world. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The chairman recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Nugent, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to call upon the Senate Majority Leader, Democrat Harry Reid. He said no budget this year. American people, I guess, don't deserve a budget. When this body, or the Senate, on the 24th of January surpassed the 1,000th day that they've yet to put a budget forward. And Harry Reid says, guess what, American public, you really don't need one. Even though this organization, this government, is running at a 40% deficit, the Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, says, don't worry about it. We don't need a plan. We don't need a budget. Even though small businesses have a budget, county and state officials have a budget, and you and I at home have a budget that we have to depend upon to guide us as we move forward throughout our year. You know, we just can't wing it any longer, Mr. Reid. The American people demand more of us. American people actually believe that the Senate should take action on bills that we in the House have passed. Now, you know, American job creators, it's about what we're supposed to be doing here, not partisan politics. Mr. Reid, this body has had more bipartisan support on bills that we've sent over to the Senate only to see them die, to see no action at all. Bills that could create jobs in America. Not hypothetical jobs, but real jobs by people that actually create jobs. Those in our small businesses that create 70% of our new jobs in America. Mr. Reid, the American public demands more of us as an institution to reach across and do the right thing. Mr. Reid, Mr. Speaker, all I can ask is that this body continues to put pressure upon the Senate, and particularly the Senate Majority Leader, Mr. Reid, to do the right thing. It doesn't matter if you pass the bills that we send over to you, Mr. Reid. It's about bringing them up on the Senate floor. Debate them. Let the American people see where you stand on the issues. And at the end of the day, whether you vote for it or against it, at least the American people have seen you in action. And the other thing the Senate can do is they can always amend any measure that we send over there and send it back to us. Not to say that we always have the best idea, but I would believe that the Senate, our brothers and sisters in the Senate, could have some good ideas. Attach them back. Amend our bill. Send it back to us for us to consider. Even go to conference if necessary. All we're asking is the United States Senate to take action on things that we in the House have passed, many in a very bipartisan way. Many in a very bipartisan way. If you remember back on January 24th, on the 1,000th day, this body here, this body, voted 410 to 1 to vote on a resolution calling upon the Senate to pass a budget. That it's a national importance that we actually have a budget, and the Senate is a participant in the discussions, not just sitting on the sidelines expecting us to carry the water. Mr. Speaker, we stand here today imploring our members to do the right thing. Let's keep the pressure on the Senate to do the right thing. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair and not to others in the second person. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's overtime for Wall Street megabanks, their CEOs, speculators, and Sharpies to come and scrub the floors of homeless shelters across this country that are crammed with people who have lost their homes. Let's make those Wall Street bankers sign up to work with Habitat for Humanity to restore housing in neighborhoods across our nation. Wouldn't that be sweet justice? Once they've paid back the billions that they owe the American people, whose homes they've raided of equity, let's put them to work. You know, wouldn't it be great to see the CEO of Goldman Sachs, I think his name is Lloyd Blankfein, out there with buckets and scrub brushes? Come to Toledo, come to Cleveland, come to America, the part you've hurt so deeply. Wouldn't it be great Let him be joined by Josh Bolten, who was there when the Bush administration handed the toxic paper to the people of the United States. Well, come on down, Angelo Mozilla from Countrywide. I think a little hard work would help you a whole lot. How about Bank of America? How about the CEO there? How about J.P. Morgan Chase? How about Jamie Dimon? Wonder when was the last time he scrubbed a floor? How about Jim Johnson, who headed up Fannie Mae? Or Hank Paulson? Oh, I'd love to see this. You know, as I speak, coming to light are important developments in the much-anticipated settlement between the individual state governments and the big Wall Street banks over the widespread use of fraudulent schemes and missing paperwork that fueled the foreclosure crisis. As the press has reported, we are seeing the possible imposition of $25 billion in penalties against Wells Fargo, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, Ally Financial, and Citigroup. Given the extent of the damage they caused, it's a small start. Just in Ohio, the financing gap was $20 billion in what it would take to stabilize the housing market in just our state. Most importantly, the New York Times is reporting that the deals will preserve the right to investigate past misdeeds by the banks. Not one, not even the titans of Wall Street, should be able to buy legal immunity for their criminal acts as millions of families lose their homes. It is important that we do not forget how systemic mortgage fraud has become. In an interview given by a former executive vice president, Countrywide Financial, a giant player in the U.S. mortgage business, this executive, who was in charge of fraud investigations at the company, related, and I quote, how Countrywide loan officers were forging and manipulating borrowers' income and asset statements to help them get loans they weren't qualified for and couldn't afford. She went on to say that all of the recycle bins, whenever we look through those, they were full of signatures that they had been cut off of one document and put onto another and photocopied or faxed. According to her, the fraud was systemic, taking place in Boston, Chicago, Miami, Detroit, Las Vegas, Phoenix, and I can tell you, Cleveland, and Parma, and Lorain, and Elyria, and Toledo, and Sandusky. What we cannot forget is that these stories are not isolated. The FBI testified before Congress as early as 2004 that they were seeing an epidemic in white-collar financial crimes, and they did not have anywhere near enough agents to go after the wrongdoers. Wasn't that convenient? While the number of agents has increased due to congressional pressure, the FBI needs to have more special agents and forensic experts to properly investigate the level of accounting corruption that is believed to exist. This is the most basic bipartisan concept I can think of, that criminals cannot be allowed to get away with their crimes because our law enforcement agencies lack the manpower to stop them. I have a bill I hope my colleagues can support, H.R. 3050, the Financial Crisis Criminal Investigation Act, that would authorize an additional 1,000 FBI agents to take on the kinds of fraud that have destroyed the economic futures of countless American families and so gravely harmed our republic. A good first step was the inclusion of more than 200 additional agents in the last appropriation cycle. This administration should use it to go after these Wall Street perpetrators. The President announced during his State of the Union address a new working group to look into mortgage fraud. It will coordinate efforts between the FBI, the Justice Department, and various states to go after those on Wall Street who have perpetuated fraud in the markets using mortgage-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations, and lots of other sophisticated financial tricks. Given the seriousness of the fraud, the number of American families that have lost their homes and savings, and the drag that that foreclosure crisis continues to have on our economy means we need more vigilance. Let's confront Wall Street, put the perpetrators in jail, and let's have them scrub floors in this new year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back my remaining time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, people from dozens of cities around America are gathering for the annual Streetcar Summit. For the last 20 years, I've been working to reintroduce the modern streetcar to American communities. We started with a project in Portland, Oregon, over 25 years ago. And it was a great pleasure for me to see this open in 2001 and watched how this streetcar investment anchored revitalization in the downtown, led to over $3 billion of private and public investment along the right-of-way, encouraged millions of people to ride the streetcar, and developed into a signature project for our community. More recently, with the new administration, when the new administration was sworn into office, I worked with the White House to implement legislation that I had in the last reauthorization we called Small Starts, which somehow had stalled. Within 4 months, the new administration was able to help us figure out how to move it forward. And in October of 2009, we were able to sign an agreement with the Obama administration and start a project. And I'm pleased to report that this project, which is provided over 1,800 jobs, that is extending a 3 1/3 mile line in the streetcar, will be open. And in fact, we've invited President Obama to ride on this. He can ride this year in a project that started in the first year in his administration, completed project. And as an added bonus, he would be able to ride the first American-built streetcar in 58 years. While it's manufactured in Portland, Oregon, I say with some modest pride, it makes a difference for people around the country because it's going to be provided to other communities like Tucson, Arizona, and the project I worked on with our former colleague Gabby Giffords. And subcontracting is occurring throughout the upper Midwest, where smaller manufacturers are helping construct this project, this product made in America. We are seeing, as a result of the administration's investment of $419 million since October of 2009, we're watching projects take place in 10 cities across America, in Detroit, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Salt Lake, that's moving forward with this vision. And indeed, the people in the conference that will be here this week represent operating systems that are now in Seattle, San Francisco, Galveston, Little Rock, Memphis, New Orleans, Lowell, Massachusetts, Kenosha, Wisconsin. There are communities all across America who've seized this vision and moving forward. And they are coming together to deal with how communities, large and small, can seize on this proven technology that was, after all, the cornerstone of urban development long about 1900. This was the technology that was driving American community development. Well, it still can drive community development, provide tens of thousands of jobs, be able to help focus the revitalization of in some areas, troubled neighborhoods. It's an opportunity to bring people together on the streetscape, to be able to give a different environment for shopping, recreating, and frankly, preventing pollution, congestion, in many cases a trip not taken. I strongly urge my colleagues, when the opportunity arises this week, to meet some of the people in the vanguard of America's new streetcar renaissance. A simple, common sense, proven technology that's cost-effective, that provides an anchor for development, and giving people an opportunity to give another choice to the residents, empowering them, making their neighborhoods more livable, their families safer, healthier, and more economically secure. This is what this Congress should be working on, coming together to take projects like this, a constructive federal partnership, stretching dollars, and making a success that we can all be proud of.
Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
The House is in recess. Members will return at noon Eastern for legislative work. The schedule